I was never one to demand attention. I came from a time when black women knew how to hold their heads high and keep their voices soft, because the world wasn't kind when we didn't. But I didn't let that stop me from building a good life. I raised my son alone after my husband passed, and when my grandson Marcus was born, I became more than a grandmother. I became his compass. So when Marcus told me he was getting married, I was proud beyond words. I bought a new dress, polished my mother's brooch, and showed up early to the rehearsal dinner, expecting warmth, maybe a few curious stares, but nothing more. What I got was silence. Cold, intentional silence. The bride's family barely looked at me. Her mother offered a forced smile that never reached her eyes. Her father muttered, "Didn't know we'd be expanding the guest list." Someone whispered something about keeping it tasteful. And just like that, I was invisible. Again. But what they didn't know, what they didn't bother to learn, is who I was. And by the end of that wedding, they would know exactly what kind of woman they had tried to ignore. My name is Dolores May Jenkins, and I've lived 78 years on this earth, most of them quiet, many of them hard, all of them honest. I was born in Alabama, raised by a woman who could make cornbread rise without baking powder, and a man who called me Miss Jenkins even when I was 5, just to remind me I deserved respect. We had little, but we had pride. Not the kind that boasts, but the kind that keeps your back straight, even when folks try to bend you. I moved north in '68, just after Dr. King was taken. I wanted a new start. I found work as a seamstress in a shop that barely paid a fair wage, but I stitched until my fingers bled. Later, I took night shifts cleaning office buildings in downtown Detroit. Not once did I ask for a handout. I earned every cent. When I married Henry, a quiet man with a gentle smile and a baritone hum that could calm crying babies, we bought a small home on the east side. We raised one son, David, who grew up watching me scrub floors and pay bills with exact change. He got a scholarship, became an engineer, and married a good woman. And then came Marcus, my only grandchild. From the minute he was born, Marcus had something different in him. Thoughtful, careful with his words, and kind without being soft. He'd sit beside me for hours while I quilted or snapped beans, asking questions about our family, our people, where we came from. I told him everything. He was the only boy in his 3rd grade class who could name the Freedom Riders. He knew my grandmother's name, Pearl, and how she had learned to read Bible pages by lamplight while pretending she was asleep. By the time Marcus was in college, we had a ritual, Sunday phone calls, no matter where he was, no matter how busy. When he met Vanessa, I could tell she was different from the others. She was polished, ambitious, beautiful in a polished TV anchor sort of way. But there was something distant about her, like she was always performing. Still, Marcus loved her, and that was enough for me. When he called to tell me they were engaged, I cried, quietly but deeply. I told him I'd be there for everything. He said, "Grandma, you're the only one I want to walk me down the aisle." I was stunned. "Your mama and daddy ought to do that," I said. "No," he told me, "they'll be there too, but I want you beside me. You made me who I am." And just like that, I bought a navy blue dress, the kind that made me feel like myself. I polished the gold brooch my mother had left me and tucked it in the box with my Sunday gloves. I was proud, not for the recognition, but for the journey. The whole journey, from Alabama to Detroit to that moment. I had no illusions. I knew Vanessa came from a different kind of family, more money, less history, but I believed naively that respect would be a given. I was wrong. The rehearsal dinner was held at an upscale country club just outside of Annie. Arbor, linen napkins, crystal water glasses, and a string quartet playing in the background like something out of a movie. I arrived 15 minutes early. That's how I was raised. Early means respectful. I wore my navy blue dress, pressed and perfect. My gloves tucked gently into my handbag, the brooch pinned to my shoulder, hair softly curled. I even brought a small envelope with a letter I'd written for Marcus, something he could read the night before the wedding. A tradition in our family, passed from one elder to the next. When I walked through the doors, I scanned the room and caught Marcus's smile across the table. He stood immediately, walked over, kissed my cheek, whispered, "You look beautiful, Grandma." And for a moment, the room was warm. Then came the introductions. Vanessa's mother, Claire, extended her hand like she was afraid of touching me. "Oh, this must be Marcus's grandmother," she said, smiling thinly. "So lovely to have you join us." I smiled politely. "It's a blessing to be here." Her eyes darted away before I could finish the sentence. Vanessa's father. Richard barely nodded. He was too busy pouring wine, barking at a waiter, and cracking jokes about the diverse guest list under his breath. I heard it, clear as day. So did Marcus. He glanced at me, jaw tight. I patted his arm and mouthed, "Let it go." As dinner unfolded, I was placed at the far end of the table, away from most of the conversation. I wasn't offended by silence. I'd lived through plenty of it. But this wasn't the natural hush of unfamiliarity. This was something else. Dismissal. Every time I tried to join a conversation, Claire would gently redirect it. When I complimented the string quartet, she turned to another guest and said, "We're hoping to upgrade to a full ensemble for the reception. Just want to keep things elevated." I smiled. I nodded. I watched. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman like me can do is be silent long enough for people to reveal who they are. And by the end of that night, they had. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the venue early, as promised. The church was beautiful. High ceilings, polished pews, white roses lining the aisle like clouds. I stood quietly at the back for a moment, letting the sanctity of the space wash over me. Weddings always bring memories with them, even for those who've buried their own. I found my seat in the second row, where Marcus had asked me to be. His parents were already there, dressed with care and beaming with pride. We exchanged smiles, warm and steady, and then Claire arrived. She walked straight down the aisle to the front pew, where she promptly moved the place card with my name on it and replaced it with one of her own friends. She didn't look at me, didn't explain, just took what was mine without a word. I didn't protest. I simply moved back a row. Dignity travels light. But the whispers started again. They let her sit so close? She's walking him down the aisle. I thought this was a formal ceremony. I sat still, back straight, hands folded in my lap. Later, as we lined up for the procession, the coordinator, clearly flustered, whispered something to Vanessa. I couldn't hear the full exchange, but I saw the bride glance my way and shake her head sharply. Then the coordinator approached me. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she said, flustered. "There's been a last-minute change. You'll be seated." Instead of walking with Marcus, the bride's family insisted. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. I looked her in the eye and said, "Tell Marcus I'll be right here, where I've always been," watching him walk forward. She nodded, her eyes filling with something that looked like shame. So I sat down, not in the back, not out of sight. Right where I had been placed, proudly, visibly, unshaken. And as I folded my hands, the words of my grandmother came back to me. "There will come a day when your silence will speak louder than any insult they offer." That day had come, and the wedding hadn't even started yet. As the music began and the first bridesmaid stepped into the aisle, I found myself floating between two places. One, the beautiful sanctuary, filled with polished shoes and perfect smiles, and the other, a memory of standing outside a department store in 1962, being told I couldn't use the front entrance. Back then, I was 19, proud of my new dress, and full of hope. The woman at the door didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "You'll need to use the service entrance, miss." Soft, controlled, dismissive. Much like Claire. It's strange how the tone of prejudice doesn't change. It simply dresses itself differently. I watched the ceremony unfold with a calm face. Vanessa looked radiant, flawless even. Her father beamed as he walked her forward, his hand trembling just slightly as he gave her away. And then came Marcus. When he stepped into the church, he looked past the pews, past the altar, straight to me. His eyes found mine, and for a moment, something passed between us. A pulse, a tether. He noticed I wasn't beside him. And I saw it, the confusion, the flash of anger, the heartbreak. But I smiled. I mouthed, "It's all right." He held my gaze for a second longer, then nodded. Because he knew. He knew who had built him. The vows were beautiful. The pastor spoke about endurance, about honor. I found myself wondering if anyone on Vanessa's side truly heard the words, or if they were just waiting for the photos. After the ceremony, while guests poured into the reception hall, I found a quiet moment in the garden behind the church. I needed air. I needed to remind myself that I hadn't come for approval. I'd come for Marcus. And that's when a voice behind me said, "I owe you an apology." I turned. It was the wedding planner, the same woman who'd been instructed to remove me from the procession. She looked ashamed. I didn't agree with it, but I followed their request. "I'm sorry." I didn't scold her. I didn't say, "You should be." I simply nodded and replied, "Sometimes people make room, and sometimes we stand so still, they have no choice but to notice we've been there all along." She blinked, then whispered, "He's lucky to have you." I looked toward the reception hall, where Marcus now stood beside his bride, all smiles. "Yes," I said softly, "he is." The reception began with the kind of elegance you'd expect. Crystal glasses, plated courses, a jazz trio humming softly from the corner. The bride's family floated around the room like royalty, exchanging smiles, sipping champagne, managing every photo angle like a campaign event. I stayed at my table, content to observe, until Marcus made his way toward me. He didn't smile. This time. Not performatively, anyway. He crouched beside my chair, took my hand and said, "Grandma, why weren't you beside me?" I looked into his eyes, those same steady eyes I used to rock to sleep, and gave him the truth. "Ask your bride," I said gently. He swallowed, nodded slowly. I figured. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and turned toward the microphone. The room quieted as he raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he began. "It means the world to have so many people here." He paused, glanced in my direction. "But there's one person here who wasn't just part of my wedding day. She made me the man I am. And while she was asked to step aside this morning, I need everyone in this room to understand something." The silence deepened. "She's never stepped aside in my life, not once." All eyes turned to me. He lifted his glass. "To my grandmother, Dolores May Jenkins, the strongest, most gracious woman I've ever known." I didn't cry. I didn't wave. I just nodded once, like my mother used to do when someone finally saw what she'd always known to be true. After Marcus's toast, there was a shift in the room. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. The air changed. The polite smiles from Vanessa's family became tighter, less certain. The applause they offered was delayed, half-hearted. And Claire, well, Claire didn't clap at all. I returned to my seat while servers cleared the dinner plates. Guests stopped by to shake my hand. A few whispered kind words, mostly from Marcus's side of the family. Others offered cautious smiles, unsure what to say now that the man of the hour had publicly drawn his line. Later in the evening, just before the first dance, Claire approached me. She stood beside my chair with her lips pressed so tightly they nearly disappeared. "That was unexpected," she said. I looked up, calm. "It wasn't for you." She blinked, then leaned in slightly. "You put him in the middle of something." "That wasn't necessary." I held her gaze. "No, Claire, I didn't put him anywhere. I stayed in my place, the place your family decided I should be. Marcus moved himself." She shifted her weight, like my stillness unnerved her. "You don't have to make this into a statement." It already was. That hung between us, heavy, unyielding. Finally, she said, "This is Vanessa's day. And it's Marcus's too, don't forget that." She didn't respond, just walked away, spine stiff. I watched her rejoin her guests, who tried their best to pretend none of it had happened. But I saw their discomfort, the unease that rises when a long-held assumption is finally disrupted. Then, something else. Vanessa approached the DJ, said something, and took the microphone. She stood under the glowing lights, face composed but tense. "Before our first dance, I want to say something." The room hushed again. "To Marcus's grandmother, I want to apologize. You were supposed to walk him down the aisle, and I changed that. It was a selfish decision." Gasps fluttered around the room. She glanced down briefly, then back up. I thought I was protecting the image of the day, but I realize now I disrespected the foundation of the man I married. She turned toward me. "You raised him with strength, with grace, and I see now that if I don't honor that, I can't fully honor him." It was not theatrical. It was not warm, but it was public. It was real, and in her own way she was trying. I nodded, just once. That was all I needed to give, and that was all she needed to know she'd been heard. The rest of the evening passed in a kind of softened clarity. There were no more comments, no second glances. People danced, laughed, and toasted. But something had settled, something that couldn't be undone. I didn't need applause or a spotlight. That had never been my way. But what I received that night was something far more enduring. Recognition, not just of presence, but of value. Marcus danced with his mother first, then called me onto the floor for the second. The band played Sam Cooke's "You Send Me," and he held my hand the way he used to when crossing the street as a boy. "Grandma," he whispered as we moved gently in place. "I didn't know she changed it until the last second. I'm sorry." "You don't owe me sorry, baby," I said. "You saw what needed to be seen. You stood up. That's what matters." He nodded, his eyes glassy. "You always say love is more than words." "It is," I said. "And you loved me right tonight." We didn't need to say more. After the dance, I returned to my seat and watched the celebration unfold. And for the first time that day, I allowed myself to relax. Not because anything had been fixed, but because something had been corrected. Later, as the guests began to leave and tables emptied, Vanessa approached me again, this time alone. She sat beside me, no performance in her posture, no pretense in her face. "I was wrong," she said plainly. "I thought elegance meant control, but you've shown me it's something else entirely." I looked at her, really looked. She was young, still learning, still trying to be enough in a world that constantly demanded more. "Elegance," I said gently, "isn't about perfection. It's about poise when you're being watched, and grace when you're being dismissed." She nodded, lips tight, eyes full. "I hope you'll give me a chance to show you I heard you," she said softly. "You just did," I replied. And in that moment, we weren't just two women separated by age or experience. We were two women trying to do right by the man we both loved. Weeks passed, and life returned to its quiet rhythm. I tended to my garden, took my walks, and read my books like I always had. But something had shifted in the marrow of me. Not loudly, just settled. Marcus called every Sunday, just like before. But now there was a different tone in his voice. He asked about me, how I was sleeping, if the fall tomatoes had come in, whether I was still going to Tuesday choir. Practice. He didn't call as a grandson checking in. He called as a man honoring where he came from. And then one Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. It was Vanessa. She stood there, holding a small, wrapped box in her hands. No cameras, no performance, just her. "I was hoping we could talk," she said. I let her in. We sat in, my small kitchen with the faded curtains and the chipped teacups I kept for company. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, "about what it means to marry into a family, not just a man. I didn't grow up with women like you, and I think I was afraid of not measuring up." That surprised me. I tried to shape the day into something I could control, but I see now. I cut out the parts that mattered most. She pushed the box across the table. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photo frame with a picture from the reception. Marcus and me dancing, just the two of us. No one else is in focus. "I had this printed the day after the wedding," she said, "because that's the part I want our children to understand one day." I looked up at her, and I saw no guilt, no performance, just growth. And that was enough. I've lived long, enough to know that not every wound needs words, and not every slight requires a reckoning. Sometimes the loudest justice is found in being still, so still that others are forced to see what they tried to ignore. That wedding didn't change who I was, but it reminded others, and maybe that's the lesson I carry forward. Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you carry. Like a shawl around your shoulders, like your mother's name in your mouth, like the stories of your people sitting just behind your eyes. I didn't speak up to shame anyone. I didn't come to the church to make a statement. I came to stand beside my grandson because I had earned that place, not through money or charm, but through years of sacrifice, faith, and unconditional love. Vanessa, for all her polish, wasn't the villain. She was a young woman wrapped in the trappings of image, but even an image bows to truth when truth stands tall enough. And Marcus, my dear boy, he saw me. Not just that day, but all the days leading to it. He didn't let me be erased. He remembered who braided his hair before picture day, who taught him to iron a shirt, who sat in the third pew every Sunday, rain or shine. I don't need more than that. I don't need to be in the center of photographs or be thanked from podiums. I just need to know that when the moment came, I held my place, not for applause, but for legacy. There is power in presence. There is grace in not backing down quietly. And there is victory in knowing that sometimes the world has to shift around you, not because you shouted, but because you stood. Sometimes I sit by the window in the late afternoon light, watching the breeze move through the trees, the kind of stillness you only notice when life finally slows down enough to let you see it. And in that quiet, I reflect, not on the pain, though there was some, not on the insult, though it was real, but on the growth, the reckoning, the moment when a family shifted its gaze and remembered its roots. We are not always invited to the table with open arms. Sometimes we have to pull out our own chair and sit with our head high, not out of arrogance, but out of a knowing that runs deeper than pride. I come from women who cooked for people who wouldn't sit beside them, who prayed for children who wouldn't carry their names, and who gave everything without expecting thanks. But I have lived long enough to know that dignity doesn't age. It sharpens. It becomes clearer in time, and it waits patiently to be acknowledged. When Marcus looks back on that day, I hope he doesn't remember the discomfort. I hope he remembers that his grandmother showed up, graceful, unshaken, present. And when Vanessa tells her children about their wedding one day, I hope she tells them the truth, not just about the music or the flowers, but about the moment. She saw a different kind of woman than she was used to. and chose to learn from her. That's what legacy looks like, not being celebrated, but being understood. And I will take that understanding with me for the rest of my days. Because when a Black woman stands in silence and is finally seen, the whole room changes. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength or a time when you had to hold your dignity in the face of disregard, take a moment to reflect. You don't have to raise your voice to be powerful. You just have to stand. For more stories about family, legacy, and quiet moral courage, follow this channel. Your support helps us share voices that often go unheard, but never unnoticed. And if no one's told you today, you matter. You're seen. And you don't have to shrink to keep the peace. Thank you for reading.